Now, last week on the program, I had psychiatrist Tanveer Ahmed to discuss the kind of mental stress bushfire victims would be facing. Of course, this will be an ongoing problem, and the federal government has poured $10.5 million into free counselling sessions Australia-wide. But tonight, I've asked Tanveer into our studio to talk about the tragic passing of University of Queensland Liberal National President Wilson Gavin. Now, after taking part in a protest against a drag queen reading program at a school, the 21-year-old was heavily trolled and later took his life. Tanveer, thank you very much for coming in.
A pleasure, Chris.
What is it about trolls who think that they can be as nasty and bully someone as much as they care to do just because the person they're bullying has a different view to them? What is wrong with these people?
Look, people online get disinhibited. Often you'll meet some of these people and they'll be the most timid, with shy, kind of just complete sort of shrinking violets. But online, and especially when they don't even know the person, they'll get completely disinhibited and really let out these primitive, the kind of the darkest anger they have below. One thing I want to make point, Chris, they're often actually not targeting the victim. What they're actually trying to do is signal their connection to some sort of group. So in this case, Wilson Gavin, who was part of the Queensland Liberal group, the backstory is they went to this drag queen sort of story time. So there are all these people piling on him. And really, the target was kind of indirectly him, but it's more people showing, hey, I'm part of this tribe that thinks this is a bad thing, thinks what he did is a bad thing. You know, this is
right, so they don't have a conception of the person involved sitting down as a normal human being and taking this on board.
Absolutely. Now, one thing I'm often asked, Chris, is social media the cause of some of these problems? One key point I want to make is social media rarely causes it. What it often does is magnify things. A great example is Dolly Everett. Now, this is the absolute tragic kid in Darwin, you'll remember, who committed suicide after all these kind of online bullying. Now, bullying's a great example where you can have in the playground 2 or 3 people, maybe, you know, teasing you, etc. But then suddenly in today's world, you go home, you haven't escaped. They're still at it. And not only they're 3, there might be 300.
Yes.
Now, one of the big issues that we have, now most people, most well-adjusted adults can separate some sort of interaction with somebody who actually knows you versus someone, I mean, you and I, you know, most people in the media have had all this abuse online.
Yeah.
But
thick and fast, it comes thick and fast.
And so someone who has no idea who I am and usually is bouncing off something completely misrepresented, you and I can brush that off, you know, quite comfortably. Often the issue is people who are already vulnerable. And in this case, Gavin Wilson, and one of his relatives said he was a tormented soul. Charlotte Dawson, who had some issues with the model, who blamed trolls for her suicide. Often people are already vulnerable, including teenagers. Now, I think one of the biggest things we have to, kind of as part of a broader societal education, is helping younger people and the vulnerable be able to separate what is said online versus what's said in the real world, so they can kind of see this, just downplay the significance of it. At the same time, the people who do this, and they do it because they're disinhibited, they want to signal that they're part of some sort of ideological group, they should also be held to account.
Just in terms of dealing with it, look, I've got my own methodology of dealing with it. You just block everyone that wants to get nasty, and then it's no problem. There's no grief because life's too short. But some people don't really know how to do that or are not comfortable doing that. What's your advice to them?
Look, I mean, I guess part of it is they've got to it's not easy to say, but they're not, the target isn't actually you. What they're doing is just trying to show that I'm part of this group that doesn't necessarily like what this person said. They have no idea who you are. You can't let it hurt you when they're essentially punching at shadows. It's very different to when someone knows you well and then they might criticise you or reject you. I mean, that's a whole different thing.
They're not stones, they're just words.
And they're not even aimed at the person, at the victim. This is one thing I'd really like to say. It may seem like that. But in reality, that's not the case.
OK, great insight. Thank you so much for your time, and hopefully people can learn something from what you've had to tell us about and those tips. Thank you, Tanveer.
Thanks very much, Chris.
Good on you, Tanveer Ahmed.